coin on our list is the 1945's Jefferson nickel, and at first glance, it might just look like any other nickel you've seen. But here's the jaw-dropping truth: this isn't your everyday pocket change. This coin was minted during World War II, a time when the US Mint had to make some surprising changes. Because nickel was a critical metal for the war effort, the Mint removed nickel from the 5-cent coin between 1942 and 1945. That means this 1945's nickel is actually made of an unusual mix: 35% silver, along with copper and manganese. Yes, you heard that right. It's a nickel that's actually part silver. The S Mint mark tells us this coin was struck at the San Francisco Mint. And if you take a close look, you'll notice something unique. The Mint mark is larger and appears above Monticello's dome on the reverse side. This was the only time in US history that the Mint mark was placed there, which already makes the coin stand out for collectors. Even in fine condition, like the one we're talking about right now, it has that worn yet charming appearance. That shows it's been through hands for decades, but still carries its history proudly. But here's where the wow factor hits. A 1945's nickel in well-circulated fine condition might fetch you anywhere from $2 to $15, which already surprises many people who think nickels aren't worth more than face value. But if you happen to find one in brilliant and circulated condition, bright, lustrous, and untouched by circulation, the value explodes into the hundreds. And that's not all. If your coin has certain striking errors, like a double die on the reverse, or even the highly sought-after over mint mark varieties, where the S is punched over another letter, the price tag skyrockets. We're talking thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars, and the record sales? Prepare to be stunned. Pristine examples of the 1945's have been known to break the $20,000 barrier at auction when they're certified at the highest grades. That's right, $20,000 for a coin most people would walk past without a second thought. But here's the kicker: rare worn nickels like these, especially in near-perfect condition with unusual toning or errors, are projected to keep climbing in value. Some expert collectors believe special examples could one day push into the six-figure range, maybe even over $450,000, if a truly one-of-a-kind piece surfaces. Imagine that: a 5-cent coin worth almost $500,000. So, how can you spot if you've got a winner? First, look for that bold S Mint mark above Monticello. Then, check the condition. Does it still show sharp details on Jefferson's face, his hair, and Monticello's steps? The better the detail, the higher the grade. Finally, do you think you might have an error or an unusually well-struck coin? It's worth getting it authenticated. This 1945's Jefferson nickel is a perfect reminder of how even the smallest, most ordinary-looking coins can hold staggering secrets. And remember, this is only the beginning, because the next coin we're about to cover could be hiding even bigger surprises. Next up, we have the 1943's Jefferson nickel. At first glance, it may look like another old 5-cent piece, maybe a bit worn from decades of use. But what most people don't realize is that this coin is a direct product of World War II, and it hides a silver secret that makes it one of the most collectible nickels in US history. Like the 1945's, the 1943's was struck at the San Francisco Mint during the height of the war, when nickel metal was needed for tanks, ships, and weapons. To save resources, the Mint changed the recipe of the nickel from its usual copper-nickel blend to a unique alloy that included 35% silver, along with copper and manganese. So yes, the very coin we're talking about, a nickel, actually contains real silver. That alone already puts it in a special category, since silver coins have always drawn collectors like magnets. But let's talk about what makes the 1943's stand out even more. The S Mint mark, again, appears above Monticello on the reverse, a design change that happened only during these wartime years. In fine condition, like the coin we're focusing on, you'll see plenty of wear. Jefferson's hair will look smooth. Monticello may be a bit flat, but the major details are still visible. This is the look of a coin that has traveled through history, likely exchanged for bread, gas rations, or even war bonds back in the 1940s. Now here's where the story takes a jaw-dropping turn. In ordinary circulated condition, the 1943S nickel might sell for $3 to $10. That's already a nice profit over face value. But if you stumble on one in brilliant uncirculated condition, sharp details with its original luster, the price climbs into the hundreds. Collectors absolutely love high-grade war nickels. And here's the real shocker. Rare varieties of the 1943S are so rare and so desired that they've sold for staggering amounts. We're talking doubled dies where the lettering or Monticello shows a ghostly duplicate image, or repunched mint marks where the S was struck twice. Some of these error coins have shattered expectations, reaching $15,000, $20,000, and even higher at major auctions. And here's the part that will blow your mind. Experts believe that a perfect condition 1943S, with strong strike, beautiful toning, and certified by one of the top grading companies, could someday command a price north of $300,000, or even $500,000, if it has that one-of-a-kind uniqueness. Imagine holding a simple nickel, worth only 5 cents at face value, but in the right condition, it could be worth more than a house. That's the wow factor that keeps collectors on the hunt. So, how do you know if you've got one? Look carefully for that S mint mark above Monticello's dome. Tilt the coin in the light. If it still has some shine, even better. And if the lettering or details look unusual or doubled, don't dismiss it. That could be your ticket to a fortune. The 1943S Jefferson nickel is more than just a coin. It's a piece of wartime history, a rare silver blend, and potentially a life-changing treasure hiding in plain sight. And the truth is, the nickels we're about to look at only get more exciting from here. Now, let's move on to another treasure, the 1942S Jefferson nickel. At first glance, this coin in fine condition might not scream fortune. The details on Jefferson's hair are worn, the steps of Monticello are faint, and it carries the look of a coin that's seen plenty of years in circulation. But the truth hiding inside this nickel is nothing short of remarkable. The year 1942 was a turning point. Early that year, nickels were still being made of their regular copper-nickel blend. But as World War II intensified and nickel became vital for military use, the U.S. Mint made the historic decision to change the composition mid-year. From October onward, every nickel struck, including the 1942S from San Francisco, was made of the unusual 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese alloy. This means that depending on when it was minted, a 1942 nickel could either be the standard copper nickel or one of these special wartime silver nickels. The S mint mark above Monticello tells us this one is indeed the silver alloy variety, making it highly collectible. Now, even in fine condition, a 1942S silver nickel carries extra value compared to face value. Most pieces sell for about $2 to $8 in this condition. But collectors don't just chase the average ones, they dream about the rare survivors that remain in pristine mint state. That's where the numbers start to turn heads. In uncirculated condition, with sharp details and full luster, values can surge to $150, $500, even over $1,000 depending on grade. But the real shock factor comes with error coins. The 1942S is infamous for having striking anomalies, like doubled dies where Jefferson's profile or the words Monticello and 5 cents appear slightly doubled. Even rarer are repunched mint marks, where the S looks like it was stamped twice. These quirky mistakes, though they may seem small, can send values soaring into 5 figures. Some rare examples have crossed the auction block for over $20,000. And here's the part that makes collectors' jaws drop. Experts predict that a top-grade 1942S nickel, with flawless surfaces, vibrant toning, and one of those special errors, could one day shatter the market at $300,000 to $450,000 or more. Think about that, a 5-cent coin struck in the middle of the war, worth almost $500,000 in the right condition. It's enough to make you check every single nickel in your collection twice. So, how do you identify one of these? Treasures? Start with the mint mark. If you see a large S above Monticello, you know you've got a silver war nickel. Next, check the wear. In fine condition, the design is soft but visible, and that still gives it collector interest. But if by chance, you come across one that shines with luster, or has strange doubling in the letters, get it checked. That coin could be far more than pocket change. It could be life-changing money. The 1942's Jefferson Nickel is living proof of how a simple design tweak in wartime America turned an ordinary coin into a piece of history worth chasing. And, believe me, the next nickel on this list raises the stakes even higher. Now, here's where things get even more exciting: the 1942 Jefferson Nickel. At first glance, especially in this dark, almost black-shaded fine condition, it might look like an old, worn coin that's seen better days. But what you're really holding is a key piece of history and one of the most important transitions in all of U.S. coinage. Why? Because the 1942 was the very first Jefferson nickel to carry the big mint mark above Monticello on the reverse. That bold P stands for the Philadelphia Mint. And here's the shocker: this was the very first time in U.S. history that the Philadelphia Mint ever used its own mint mark. Up until then, Philadelphia coins had no mark at all. So when you see that large P looming above Monticello's dome, you know you're looking at the beginning of something historic. Now, the 1942 is one of the famous worn nickels, just like the others from 1942 to 1945. Its composition was changed because nickel was needed for tanks, planes, and weapons. Instead, these nickels were struck in a strange mixture of 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese. That black shade you sometimes see like on this very coin comes from decades of toning and oxidation that happen naturally to silver. Over time, to collectors, that dark patina can be a sign of age, authenticity, and history. In fine condition, the 1942 might only bring $3 to $10. But that's just the surface story. When you get into higher grades, things heat up fast. An uncirculated 1942 can sell for $200, $500, even over $1,000 when the strike is sharp and the luster intact. But here comes the jaw-dropper: certain varieties of the 1942 are among the most desirable Jefferson nickels ever made. The most famous is the 1942 double die reverse, where the words Monticello and 5 cents appear doubled and bold to the naked eye. That error alone can turn a 5-cent coin into a $10,000 treasure. Some pristine, top-graded examples of these error varieties have even hammered down at auction for prices north of $20,000, and the potential doesn't stop there. Experts suggest that if a perfect 1942 double die with vivid toning and flawless surfaces ever comes to market, it could push into the six-figure range, maybe even $400,000 to $500,000. Imagine a coin that most people overlook in their change being worth as much as a luxury home. That's the magic of the wartime Jefferson Nickels. So, how do you know if you have one? Start by flipping the coin and looking right above Monticello. If you see that large P, you've got history in your hands. Then, tilt it under the light. If you see doubling on the letters or unusual spread in the design, you may be staring at a fortune. Even with that dark, black shade of toning, collectors love the authenticity, and it proves the coin's silver content has been reacting with the environment for more than 80 years. The 1942 black shade Jefferson nickel isn't just a coin. It's the first of its kind, a wartime experiment, and possibly a hidden jackpot waiting in an old box or coin jar. And as rare as this one is, the next coin on our list raises the bar even higher. Now, it's turn our attention to the 1943 Jefferson nickel. At first glance, in fine condition, this coin shows the typical signs of where Jefferson's cheek and jaw are smoothed out. Monticello has lost some of its crisp detail, and the surfaces are a bit dull. But what makes this coin jaw-dropping is not how it looks at first sight, but what it represents. This nickel was struck at the Philadelphia Mint in the middle of World War II, when America's factories were working around the clock to fuel the war effort. The government needed nickel metal for tanks and artillery, so the mint swapped the regular alloy for a mix of copper, manganese, and here's the shocker, 35% silver. That's right. This 1943p nickel is actually part silver, and, even more historic, it carries the giant P mint mark above Monticello, only the second year in U.S. history that Philadelphia coins ever had a mint mark. That bold P was a sign to the world that the coin was different, special, and tied directly to the fight for victory. Now, in fine condition like this, a 1943p may bring $2 to $6. Nothing earth-shattering there, but this is where the story takes a dramatic turn. In mint state condition, sharp and lustrous, the value jumps into the hundreds. Collectors love this issue because of its history and silver content. But when you bring errors into the mix, the price tags explode. The 1943p is famous for double dies, especially on the reverse, where the words Monticello and 5 cents sometimes show a dramatic doubling. That kind of error transforms a common coin into a 4 or even 5-figure prize. And the record sales? Hold on to your seat. High-grade 1943p nickels, certified at the very top levels, have sold for over $10,000, and that's without any major errors. With the right error, collectors have been willing to pay $20,000, $30,000, or more. And here's the jaw-dropper. Experts believe that a flawless, one-of-a-kind specimen, perhaps with brilliant rainbow toning or a dramatic double die, could one day hammer for $350,000 to $500,000. Imagine a single nickel worth more than a Ferrari. That's the kind of shock value hidden in this unassuming wartime piece. So, how do you know if you've got a winner? First, flip it over and look for that giant P mint mark over Monticello that tells you it's a Silver War nickel. Next, examine the lettering. If Monticello or 5 cents looks doubled, or if anything on the coin looks unusual, you could be holding a jackpot. And don't underestimate the coin, even if it's darkened or worn. Collectors know these 1943p nickels carry a silver heart and a wartime legacy that makes them timeless. The 1943p is more than just a nickel. It's a symbol of America's fight during World War II, a rare experiment in silver coinage, and a potential fortune hiding in plain sight. And believe me, the final coin we're about to reveal could be the most shocking of all. And now, we come to the last coin on this list, the 1944p Jefferson nickel. At first glance, in fine condition, this coin looks like a tired old nickel. Jefferson's portrait is worn smooth, the steps of Monticello are faint, and the surfaces have the dull gray look of a coin that's been passed through countless hands. But don't be fooled by its appearance. This is one of the most collectible nickels of all, and in the right condition, it could be worth a life-changing fortune. The 1944p was minted in Philadelphia during the height of World War II. Like the 1943, this coin carries that large P mint mark right above Monticello on the reverse. Remember, Philadelphia had never used a mint mark before the war, so this alone makes it historic. And once again, because nickel metal was too important for weapons and armor, the mint struck this coin with that unusual wartime alloy: 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese. Yes, this is another nickel that's actually part silver. But here's where it gets exciting. The 1944p is one of the issues known for producing some of the strongest strikes and, at the same time, some of the most valuable errors in the entire series. In fine condition, the value is modest, about $2 to $7, just a small bump above face value. But once you climb into uncirculated grades, the story changes dramatically. A mint state 1944p can easily bring $300, $500, even over $1,000 if certified at high levels. But here's the real shocker: collectors have discovered rare double die errors on this coin, where the words Monticello and 5 cents appear doubled and bold. Others show repunched mint marks, where the P was struck twice, creating a ghostly shadow. These bizarre mistakes have sold for over $15,000 at auction, and here's where the wow factor goes into overdrive. The highest graded, perfect 1944p Nickels flawless in every detail, with rainbow toning and no marks, have fetched astonishing prices of $25,000 to $40,000. But many experts believe the ceiling hasn't been hit yet. If the right combination of condition, error, and eye appeal ever surfaces, the 1944P could smash all expectations and hit the $500,000 mark. Just imagine a nickel, plain 5-cent coin, commanding $450,000 or more. That's the kind of discovery that turns an ordinary collector into a legend. So, how do you know if you might be holding one of these treasures? Start by looking for that bold P above Monticello's dome that tells you it's a Silver War nickel. Then check the lettering carefully for doubling or strange shadows on the mint mark. And finally, don't dismiss the coin even if it looks dark or worn. Every 1944P tells the story of wartime America, and collectors will pay dearly for examples that survive in top condition or with rare errors. The 1944P Jefferson nickel is the perfect reminder of why we never overlook old coins. What looks like a simple nickel can turn out to be a silver wartime rarity, and in the right hands, it can command staggering sums. And there you have it, 6 old and rare Jefferson nickels that could be hiding in plain sight, each one carrying history, mystery, and the possibility of a shocking payday. Which one of these surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this hunt for hidden treasures, hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss the chance to discover if the change in your pocket might just be worth a fortune. The very first coin we'll explore tonight is the 1985D Jefferson nickel, struck in Denver. At first glance, it looks like just another nickel from the mid-80s. But don't be fooled, this coin holds secrets most people have never even heard about. Imagine digging through a handful of loose change, expecting nothing, only to realize you're holding a piece that could transform 5 cents into thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's the thrill of coin collecting, and this particular date has given collectors more than a few surprises. Now, let's set the stage. The Denver Mint in 1985 produced over 500 million nickels. So yes, the majority are common. But here's where the story gets interesting. When you're talking about nickels, rarity doesn't always come from the date itself. It often comes from what went wrong during production. A typical fine condition example like the one we're looking at today might fetch only a small premium, a couple of dollars. But collectors don't hunt nickels from the 1980s just for pocket change. They hunt them for the mistakes, the rarities, and the pristine survivors that slipped through the cracks. And one of the most shocking things about this 1985D is that in higher grades, it transforms dramatically in value. An uncirculated example, with blazing luster, free from scratches, can reach into the hundreds. That alone is surprising for an 80s nickel. But take it up one more notch, coins graded at the very top of the scale, say Ms. 67 and above, and you're looking at values well into the tens of thousands. Yes, a nickel struck less than 40 years ago can rival the price of a classic car if it survives in nearly flawless condition, but the real shockers are the rare errors tied to this date. A small batch of 1985D nickels was struck off-center, some missing crucial parts of the design. Others show dramatic die cracks or clipped planchets, where part of the metal blank was missing before the coin was struck. One particularly bizarre error shows doubling in Jefferson's profile and lettering, a dramatic doubled die that can catapult this coin's value into the 5-figure range instantly. Imagine a nickel worth $25,000 just because of a misaligned strike. And here's where it gets even more jaw-dropping. Collectors talk about the holy grail of modern nickels, a full step designation on the reverse Monticello building. Those tiny steps at the base of Jefferson's home? On most coins, they're weak or blurry. But if you find a 1985D with full, crisp, uninterrupted steps, even in mid-grade, the price explodes. We're talking values soaring past $50,000, with auction records creeping toward the 6-figure mark. That's right. A coin you could easily overlook in your change could secretly be a $100,000 treasure. The fine condition piece we're discussing today is a survivor of everyday circulation, a reminder of the billions struck. But here's the magic. Even in this grade, It sparks the imagination of what could be hiding in jars, drawers, and rolls of nickels across America. For collectors, every 1985D is worth a second look. And when you know what to look for: errors, full steps, top grades, that's when you go from pocket change to life-changing discovery. So before you dismiss your nickels as just spare change, think about this 1985D, the ordinary coin in your hand might have siblings out there worth a staggering fortune. And if that doesn't make you want to check every single nickel you own, I don't know what will. Now, let's turn back the clock to 1952, a Jefferson nickel that carries with it the history of post-war America. At first glance, a fine condition example like the one we're looking at might seem ordinary, worn from years of circulation, but the truth is, this date holds surprises that can make collectors' jaws drop. Just imagine, a coin struck more than 70 years ago, slipping through generations of hands, could today be hiding a value that shocks even seasoned experts. The 1952 Jefferson nickel was struck in 3 different locations: Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with the little d, and San Francisco with the coveted S. While millions were produced overall, not all of them survived in equal numbers. By the early 50s, coin production was high, and circulation was rough on nickels. That's why finding a sharp and circulated example today is far more difficult than people realize. So, what makes this coin stand out? First, it's the artistry. The obverse features the proud bust of Thomas Jefferson, while the reverse showcases his iconic Monticello home. But here's where collectors' eyes sharpen. Those steps at the base of Monticello. Most nickels from the 1950s show soft, flat details. But if you can find a 1952 with crisp, uninterrupted full steps, you're holding a rarity. A normal circulated example may fetch $1 or $2, but one with full steps in top mint state condition has shattered records, climbing over $20,000 at auction. Now, let's talk errors, because the 1952 nickel has its share of wild stories. Imagine a coin struck off center, Jefferson's face partially missing, or a nickel struck on the wrong metal planchet altogether. A handful of these oddities have appeared, including 1952 nickels struck on silver dime blanks. Picture a nickel-sized coin shining like silver, an absolute minting mistake. These errors can rocket in value well past $50,000, depending on condition and eye appeal. But here's the true shocker. The 1952S, struck at the San Francisco Mint, is notorious for being scarce in high grades. Collectors hunting for full steps know how elusive it is. That's why when a perfect specimen shows up, flawless surfaces, radiant luster, crisp steps, the bidding wars begin. We're talking 6-figure fireworks. Imagine a single nickel bringing in $120,000. Yes, it has happened. And that's where the 1952 nickel leaves most people stunned. A coin that once bought a pack of gum could pay for a brand new luxury car today. Holding this fine condition example in hand, we see the wear and tear of everyday life. In 1950s America, it's a coin that tells a story, bridge between ordinary use and extraordinary potential. And that's the magic here. While most of these nickels live quiet lives at the bottom of coin jars, a select few exist out there worth life-changing money. So the next time you spot a worn old nickel from the early 50s, don't dismiss it. Flip it over, check those steps, study its details, because hidden among the ordinary are treasures that could make history and possibly make you a fortune. And remember, this is only the beginning, because the next Jefferson nickel we're about to uncover carries even more surprises, and I guarantee you'll want to see just how high its value can go. Now, let's roll back even further, all the way to 1940. Picture America on the edge of history. The world was bracing for war, and yet here at home, the U.S. Mint was striking millions of Jefferson nickels that would circulate through the hands of soldiers, families, and collectors alike. The 1940 Jefferson nickel, especially in extra fine condition like the one we're looking at now, carries that living history with it. But what most people don't realize is that this coin, which once jingled in the pockets of ordinary Americans, can sometimes be worth an extraordinary fortune. The year 1940 was only the second year of issue for the Jefferson Nickels series, which had replaced the Buffalo nickel just the year before. That alone makes it special. These are among the earliest Jeffersons, struck when the design was still fresh, and the mint was experimenting with details. Our coin shows Jefferson's classic profile on the front and the Monticello home on the back, with sharpness still visible even after decades of circulation. Extra fine condition means this coin still retains much of its original detail, and that's exactly what collectors want. Now, the numbers. Over 176 million nickels were struck in Philadelphia that year, with additional runs in Denver and San Francisco. Common? At first glance, yes. But here's where it gets interesting. Most of those coins have been worn down to almost unrecognizable condition. Extra fine pieces are scarce, and uncirculated gems are downright rare. And then there's the Holy Grail, the full steps designation. If you flip a 1940 nickel over and see those razor-sharp steps on Monticello, uninterrupted and bold, you may have just uncovered a jackpot. In fact, some of these coins have sold for staggering amounts, climbing past $40,000 in top-graded full-step condition. But it doesn't end there. This year is infamous among collectors for striking anomalies. There are documented double die obverses, where Jefferson's profile and the lettering appear doubled, and these aren't minor. We're talking dramatic doubling that transforms the coin into a rare error piece, instantly multiplying its value. A strong double die example in pristine condition, easily $75,000 or more. Imagine a nickel struck wrong in 1940, now worth more than a brand new luxury car today. And then there's the off-metal strikes. A handful of 1940 nickels are known to have been struck on leftover silver dime planchets, producing a smaller, shinier coin with Jefferson squeezed into an undersized blank. These wild mint errors are so rare that they can fetch 6 figures at auction. Yes, 6 figures for a 5-cent coin, over $150,000 in some cases. The extra fine example we're holding now tells a quieter story. It's a survivor, showing the touch of history, but still keeping the beauty of its design. But even here, collectors will pay premiums because anything above average condition in this early date is worth preserving. Think of it like this: every 1940 nickel is a chance at discovery, whether it's a hidden double die, a full-step rarity, or even one of those off-metal treasures. So the next time you see a nickel dated 1940, don't pass it by. Look closely. What may seem like just an old coin could actually be a 6-figure hidden treasure, waiting to reward the sharp-eyed collector. And believe me, if you thought this 1940 nickel was shocking, the next coin we're about to explore takes things to a whole new level. You will not believe the kind of value hiding in the next Jefferson. Now, let's move to one of the most famous dates in the entire Jefferson Nickels series, the 1964 nickel. At first glance, a fine condition example like the one we're holding might look like nothing more than an old coin that's been around the block. After all, 1964 nickels are everywhere. But that's where the story gets really interesting. Because while this coin seems common, hiding within the millions that were struck are some of the most shocking rarities and valuable errors ever discovered. Here's the background. In 1964, the U.S. Mint was facing a national coin shortage. People were hoarding silver coins as their metal value rose, and in response, the Mint struck an absolutely staggering number of nickels. Over 2.8 billion 1964 nickels came out of Philadelphia and Denver combined. It was the highest mintage of the entire Jefferson series. That's why to this day, you can still find 1964 nickels in your change. But here's the twist: when billions are made, mistakes are bound to happen, and some of those mistakes are now worth a fortune. Take, for instance, the rare 1964 double die. On some coins, Jefferson's profile and the inscriptions show dramatic doubling. These aren't just minor errors, they're bold and unmistakable. A strong double die in mint condition can easily skyrocket in value, hitting $30,000 or more. Imagine a coin you've probably spent hundreds of times in your life suddenly being worth more than a brand new car. That's the kind of shock the 1964 nickel delivers. But there's more. Collectors obsess over the full steps designation on this coin. Just like with earlier Jeffersons, most 1964 nickels are mushy in detail, the steps of Monticello blurred into nothing. But a razor-sharp, full-step specimen is a true rarity. One of these, in top condition, has reached values soaring over $50,000 at auction. Yes, $50,000 for a nickel most people ignore. And let's not forget about mint errors. The 1964 nickel has appeared struck on copper penny blanks, creating a reddish-colored oddity that collectors go crazy for. Others have been discovered struck off center, or even missing parts of the design entirely. These error coins regularly climb into the $10,000 to $25,000 range. Some ultra-rare off-metal strikes have even gone past the six-figure mark, over $100,000 for a coin that was supposed to be worth 5 cents. Now, the fine condition piece we're looking at today might not carry those sky-high values on its own. In this grade, it's worth a little more than face value, maybe $1 or $2 to a collector who wants it for a folder. But don't let that fool you. Every single 1964 nickel is worth checking. Because this is the year when fortune hides in plain sight. The difference between pocket change and a jackpot could come down to something as small as the steps on Monticello or a doubled line in the lettering. And that's the thrill, isn't it? Knowing that billions were made, but only a handful hold. The kind of value that could change someone's life. That's why collectors never stop hunting 1964 nickels. Somewhere out there, in an old coffee can, a dresser drawer, or a box of coins handed down from a grandparent, one of these rarities could be waiting. So the next time you see that humble 1964 date, don't shrug it off. Take a closer look. Because behind that worn surface could be the kind of treasure that makes headlines. And just wait until you see the next Jefferson nickel in our lineup. If you thought this one was shocking, the next coin story will leave you absolutely stunned. Next up, we have the 1947 Jefferson nickel, shown here in extra fine condition. At first glance, it may look like just another mid-century nickel, a simple piece of pocket change from the years right after World War II. But believe me, this coin holds secrets that have shocked collectors time and time again, turning a humble 5-cent piece into something worth thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars under the right circumstances. To set the scene, 1947 was the first year after the United States ended its wartime silver-nickel experiment. From 1942 through 1945, Jefferson nickels had been made with 35% silver to save nickel metal for the war effort. But by 1946, the mint went back to the regular copper-nickel alloy we know today. So, the 1947 issue represents a kind of return to normalcy, the start of a new era. Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco all struck nickels that year, and while millions were made, not all of them are created equal. This extra fine condition example we're looking at shows a coin that's clearly seen circulation, but still holds much of its sharpness. Jefferson's portrait is bold. Monticello's features are still strong, and that's important, because collectors place huge value on details, especially the steps of Monticello. Full steps 1947 nickels are rare, and when you find one, the value jumps from pocket change into a serious payday. One pristine full-step specimen has sold at auction for well over $35,000. Yes, $35,000 for a nickel minted in the late 1940s. But where it gets really shocking is in the error department. The 1947 Jefferson is notorious for striking mistakes. There are examples with dramatic off-center strikes where Jefferson's face is shifted halfway off the coin, and others with broad strikes, where the metal spread too far, leaving the edges distorted. Some of these pieces bring $5,000 to $10,000 even in average condition. But here's the real stunner. A few rare off-metal errors exist, with 1947 nickels accidentally struck on silver planchets left over from the wartime years. Imagine that a post-war nickel accidentally minted in silver. These are so rare that when one surfaces, it can sell for over $150,000. That's a life-changing discovery hiding in what looks like just another nickel. And we can't forget the double dies. There are known varieties of the 1947 nickel where the words Monticello or 5 cents show bold doubling. A collector who finds one in high grade could be holding a piece worth tens of thousands of dollars. A simple twist of the mints. Machinery turned an ordinary coin into a treasure. Now, this extra fine condition coin we see today might not carry those mind-blowing values on its own. In this grade, it might sell for a few dollars. Maybe a bit more if it's from San Francisco where mintages were lower. But here's the beauty of it. Every 1947 nickel is worth examining carefully. Each one is a doorway to possibility, the possibility of hidden raring, overlooked errors, or even that once-in-a-lifetime silver strike. Think about it. A coin that bought a cup of coffee in 1947 could, if struck with a rare mistake, buy you a brand new house in today's market. That's the power of numismatics, and that's why the Jefferson Nickels series is so thrilling to collectors. So don't underestimate this coin. The 1947 nickel proves that history, rarity, and sheer luck can transform even the humblest pocket change into a six-figure fortune. And if you thought this one was wild, just wait until we reveal the next Jefferson nickel in our lineup. Its story might just leave you speechless. Now, let's move into the 1990s with the 1991p Jefferson nickel struck at the Philadelphia Mint. To most people, this is just an ordinary coin from pocket change, not even considered old yet. But here's where collectors know better sometimes. The most ordinary looking dates hide the most extraordinary surprises. In this nickel, even in fine condition, like the one we're looking at today, has a story that can leave you speechless. The U.S. Mint produced more than 600 million nickels in 1991, so yes, it's a high mintage year. Most of these coins are still circulating today, worn and beaten like the one here in fine condition. On the surface, you might think there's no reason to save it, but with modern nickels, the value doesn't come from how many were made. It comes from what slipped through the cracks at the mint. Let's start with condition. A regular fine condition 1991p may only bring $1 or so to a collector who needs it for a set. But when you move into the top uncirculated grades, everything changes. At Ms. 67 and above, these coins become very rare. There are collectors competing fiercely for top population coins, and that competition drives values into the tens of thousands. A pristine, full-step example with razor-sharp details has already reached over $15,000 at auction. For a coin most people wouldn't glance at twice. That's shocking. But here's where it gets even crazier. The 1991p has a handful of extremely rare error varieties that are worth life-changing money. There are off-center strikes, where Jefferson's portrait is pushed halfway off the coin, leaving blank metal on one side. There are broad strikes without rims, double strikes where the coin was struck twice in the press, and even wrong planchet. Errors where nickels were accidentally struck on penny or dime blanks. These bizarre minting mistakes can command values of $25,000 to $50,000, and that's not an exaggeration. One of the most shocking finds is the so-called rotated die error. Imagine flipping your 1991p nickel over and finding that the reverse design is upside down in relation to the front. A handful of these dramatic rotated die pieces have surfaced, and collectors will pay over $75,000 for a perfect example. Yes, $75,000 for what looks like a regular nickel until you notice the flaw. And then, of course, there's the Holy Grail, the full steps designation. Just like with earlier Jeffersons, if you can find a 1991p with crisp, uninterrupted steps at the base of Monticello, you're looking at a serious rarity. In the absolute top grades, such coins could push well past $100,000 at auction. Imagine a coin minted during the George W. Bush era suddenly being worth more than most people's houses, all because it was struck just a little sharper than the rest. Now, the coin in fine condition that we're holding today is a survivor of circulation. It may not carry the breathtaking price tags of those ultra-rare varieties, but it serves as a reminder. For every worn nickel like this, there could be a twin out there hiding in pristine condition, waiting to stun collectors with a six-figure payday. And that's the magic of coin collecting. The thrill that something so common, so overlooked, can suddenly transform into a treasure. The 1991p proves that even modern nickels, when you know what to look for, can be worth an absolute fortune. So before you toss aside that handful of 90s change, take a second look, because the difference between 5 cents and $100,000 could be sitting right there in your hand. And don't go anywhere. The next Jefferson nickel we're about to uncover has an even more unbelievable story, and you won't want to miss it. Our next stop is the 1989D Jefferson nickel, struck at the Denver Mint. Now, most people would see this coin in fine condition and shrug it off. After all, the late 1980s nickels are everywhere. The Mint struck more than 570 million of these in 1989 alone, making it a high mintage year. But here's where things get exciting. When you're dealing with hundreds of millions of coins, the rare mistakes and top condition survivors stand out like glittering gems. And that's where the big money is. This particular nickel shows the wear you'd expect from years of circulation. Jefferson's cheekbone is flattened, Monticello's steps are faint, but enough detail remains to clearly see its 1989D date and mint mark. In fine condition, this coin might only be worth a small premium, maybe $1 or $2. But don't let that fool you, because the true shock comes when you look at what else lurks within the 1989D issue. First, let's talk about mint state coins. An uncirculated 1989D Jefferson nickel with glowing luster is already tough to find, because most went straight into everyday use. Push the grade even higher into Ms. 66 and Ms. 67 territory, and now you're talking serious rarity. Collectors chasing top-graded sets of modern nickels will bid fiercely, and auction prices have soared to $10,000 to $20,000 for the finest known examples. A nickel barely 3 decades old suddenly worth more than a down payment on a house. That's shocking, but the real jaw-droppers are the error coins. The 1989D nickel is known for some spectacular mistakes. There are broad strikes where the rim disappears entirely, double strikes where Jefferson's face appears twice, and dramatic off-center coins where part of the design is missing altogether. Each of these errors can bring $5,000 to $15,000 depending on condition and eye appeal. And then we have the wrong planchet strikes, the unicorns of the error world. A few 1989D nickels have been discovered struck on penny blanks or even dime planchets. These odd-sized, odd-colored nickels are instantly recognizable and highly desirable. One of these wild errors has fetched over $50,000 at auction. Imagine flipping through your change and spotting a nickel that looks too small or the wrong color, only to discover it's a 5-figure treasure. And of course, the full steps designation remains the golden ticket. Like all Jefferson nickels, if you can find a 1989D where the steps of Monticello are perfectly struck and fully visible, you've struck collector gold. At the highest grades, a full steps 1989D can break into 6-figure territory, with some examples estimated at $125,000 or more. Yes, a late 1980s nickel, worth the price of a brand new luxury SUV, all because the steps are sharp. The fine condition example we're holding now tells another story, the everyday workhorse coin of its time. But every coin like this is a reminder that extraordinary rarities exist in the same year, sometimes hiding in plain sight. And that's the thrill, the chase, the possibility, the shock of discovery. So never overlook a 1989D Jefferson nickel. Behind that worn surface could be a rare error, a pristine survivor, or even the key to a 6-figure payday. And believe me, the next coin in our lineup takes the suspense even higher. If you thought a 1989D could surprise you, just wait until you see what's coming next. Now, we come to the 1988p Jefferson nickel, struck at the Philadelphia Mint. To most people, this is the very definition of pocket change. The U.S. Mint produced over 600 million nickels that year, and in fine condition, like the one we're looking at today, it may seem like it has no chance of being valuable. But here's the reality: even in a sea of hundreds of millions, there are hidden treasures, and the 1988p is one of those dates where fortune can appear when you least expect it. This example shows the wear of circulation. Jefferson's hairlines are flat, Monticello's steps are worn down, yet the details are still visible enough to give it character. A collector might only pay $1 or $2 for a fine condition piece, but that's just the beginning of the story. Because when you move into the top mint-state grades, the 1988P becomes a completely different animal. In lower uncirculated condition, these nickels can bring modest premiums, but in ultra-high grades like Ms. 66 and Ms. 67, values skyrocket. That's because very few exist with sharp detail and flawless surfaces. Auction records have already reached $15,000 to $20,000 for the finest examples. Think about that. A modern nickel, struck during the Reagan to Bush transition years, commanding the kind of money that shocks even veteran collectors. But the real wow factor lies in the errors. The 1988P Jefferson nickel is notorious for some jaw-dropping mistakes. There are dramatic off-center strikes where Jefferson's portrait is pushed halfway off the planchet. There are broad strikes where the coin spread out too far and lost its rim. And then there are multiple strikes where the coin was struck more than once inside the press, leaving ghostly overlapping images of Jefferson's face. Each of these rare errors can bring $10,000 to $25,000, depending on condition and severity, and it doesn't end there. Wrong planchet errors have surfaced too. Some 1988P nickels were accidentally struck on penny or dime blanks, producing odd-colored or undersized coins. Imagine holding what looks like a small copper nickel only to discover it's worth over $50,000. That's not fantasy. Those coins exist, and when they hit the auction block, they send shockwaves through the numismatic world. And of course, the Holy Grail remains the full steps designation. Collectors obsess over finding a 1988P nickel with sharp, uninterrupted steps on Monticello's base. They are vanishingly rare, but when one appears in a top grade, its value can soar into six-figure territory. We're talking $100,000 or more for a 5-cent coin that most people would never give a second glance. That's the magic of Jefferson nickels. The tiniest details can transform pocket change into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. The fine condition example we have here may not break the bank on its own, but it's an essential reminder. Every 1988P nickel holds the potential to be a cousin of one of those rarities. That's why collectors never overlook this year, and why every coin jar, roll, or handful of change could be hiding a shocking surprise. So don't underestimate the power of the 1988P Jefferson nickel, because one mistake at the mint, one perfectly struck coin, or one overlooked detail could turn an ordinary nickel into a six-figure treasure. And stay tuned, because the next Jefferson nickel we're about to explore might just outdo them all in terms of rarity and value. You won't believe what's coming next. Now, we come to the 1984P Jefferson nickel, struck at the Philadelphia Mint. At first glance, an extra fine example like this shows the wear of circulation, but still carries plenty of detail. Jefferson's cheekbone, the lettering, and much of Monticello's architecture are still visible. It looks like an everyday coin from the 1980s. But believe me, this is one of those dates where the deeper you look, the more astonishing the story becomes. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 800 million nickels in 1984, a massive mintage that makes this one of the most common dates in the Jefferson series. But as collectors know, when so many are struck, the true rarities stand out even more, and that's where the excitement begins. In extra fine condition, a 1984P nickel might only be worth a small premium, maybe $1 or $2. But let's move up the scale. In mint state condition, these coins are already tough to find. Push it to Ms. 66 or higher, with clean surfaces and sharp details, and suddenly the price tag shoots up. We're talking $7,500 to $15,000 for a top-graded piece. That's right, a nickel most people ignore, commanding 5-figure auction prices when it survives in near-perfect shape. But the 1984P holds even more secrets. This date is famous among collectors for one of the most dramatic doubled dies in modern U.S. coinage, the 1984P double die obverse. On these coins, Jefferson's profile shows heavy doubling, especially in the eye area, creating what collectors call the extra eyelid. It's bold, it's unmistakable, and it transforms this coin from pocket change into a treasure. Even in circulated condition, these can bring hundreds. In uncirculated grades, the value skyrockets to $25,000, $40,000, even pushing towards $75,000 for the best examples. Imagine a 5-cent piece with a quirky minting mistake suddenly being worth as much as a luxury car, and it doesn't stop there. The 1984p nickel is also known with rare off-center strikes, broad strikes, and double strikes that collectors prize. Each of these errors, especially in higher grades, can sell for $10,000 to $20,000 or more. And if you happen to find a 1984p with crisp, uninterrupted full steps on Monticello, you've hit the jackpot. These are ultra rare and can bring six-figure sums at auction. That's right, a coin minted during the Reagan years has been valued at over $100,000 simply because of the way it was struck. So, what does this extra fine example tell us? It's a survivor, a piece of everyday history from the 1980s that hints at the incredible rarities hiding among its brothers and sisters. Even though this one may not bring in six figures on its own, it represents a year when collectors must keep their eyes wide open, because within the billion struck in 1984 lies one of the most exciting Jefferson nickel varieties of the modern era. Think about it, a nickel you could have pulled from your change during the 80s could actually be worth enough today to buy a car or even a house, if it carries the right doubling or perfect strike. That's the kind of shock value that keeps collectors checking every single coin. So, don't overlook the 1984p Jefferson nickel. With its double dies, error varieties, and elusive high-grade survivors, this coin proves that even modern nickels can be hiding fortunes in plain sight. And just wait, because the final Jefferson nickel we're about to reveal in this lineup may be the most unbelievable of them all. You won't want to miss it. And now, we arrive at the grand finale, the 1946 Jefferson nickel. At first glance, a coin like this in fine condition might seem like nothing more than an old nickel that has passed through countless hands over nearly 8 decades. But what you're about to hear will make you look at every 1946 nickel in a whole new light. Because this one hides a shocking twist in American coinage history. The year 1946 was a turning point. During World War II, from 1942 through 1945, the U.S. Mint struck nickels with a very special composition, 35% silver, to save nickel metal for the war effort. These war nickels are well known to collectors, but in 1946, the Mint switched back to the regular copper-nickel alloy. And that's where the story gets exciting. Most 1946 nickels are just that ordinary base metal coins, but a tiny handful of errors slipped out, struck on leftover silver planchets from the wartime years. That's right, silver 1946 nickels exist, and they are some of the most sought-after modern rarities in American numismatics. Imagine the shock of a collector dropping a 1946 nickel on the table, only to hear the brighter ring of silver. These rare off-metal errors are worth an absolute fortune. Even in well-worn circulated grades, they've brought $20,000 to $30,000. But in uncirculated condition, with the silver shine intact, values are well into the six figures, $150,000, $200,000, even more depending on the grade. That's right, a 5-cent coin from 1946 that could buy you a brand new luxury car today. Now, let's talk about the regular issues, because even those hold secrets. The 1946 was struck at all three major mints: Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with a D, and San Francisco with an S. While the Philadelphia issues are more common, the S mint is much tougher to find in high grades. And when you combine an uncirculated 1946S with full steps, those rare sharp, crisp lines at Monticello's base, you're talking a showstopper. These have sold at auction for over $40,000 to $60,000. Not bad for a coin most people overlook in their change jars. But here's another twist. Collectors have discovered 1946 nickels with dramatic double strikes, off-center strikes, and even die cracks that create eerie, one-of-a-kind designs. Some of these mint errors have been valued at $10,000 to $25,000, depending on just how wild the mistake looks. The truth is, every unusual 1946 nickel tells a story, and some of those stories are worth life-changing money. Now, looking at this fine condition example, it's easy to dismiss it as just an old coin. The details are worn, Jefferson's cheek is soft, Monticello's steps are long gone. But here's the lesson, even coins in this condition could hide surprises like being struck on the wrong planchet or carrying a rare die variety. That's the thrill of coin collecting. Every coin has potential, and that's why the 1946 Jefferson nickel closes out our journey today. From the war years to the post-war transition, from silver errors worth hundreds of thousands to rare, full steps, treasures, this humble nickel proves that any pocket change can hide a miracle. So the next time you see a 1946 nickel, don't brush it aside. Look closely. We've just seen how an ordinary-looking coin can turn into an extraordinary treasure. And with coins like these, you never know the next nickel you find could be worth a fortune. Let's start with a coin that might surprise you, the year 2000 Jefferson nickel. At first glance, especially in bad condition, most people would toss it aside without a second thought. After all, the year 2000 doesn't feel old enough to be valuable, right? But here's where things get fascinating. This particular nickel, struck at the Denver Mint, is part of a transition period in U.S. coinage history. By the year 2000, the Mint was preparing major changes to the nickel design, which would later roll out in the mid-2000s. But tucked inside this seemingly ordinary year are a handful of errors and production quirks that drive collectors crazy. Even in bad condition, what makes the 2000 nickel stand out are striking mistakes: double dies, off-center strikes, and even coins where the mint mark was weakly punched. Some examples have been found with such dramatic doubling on Jefferson's eye or on the word liberty that collectors were willing to pay eye-popping amounts just to secure them. Think about this, while most 2000 nickels in circulation are worth just face value 5 cents, a rare error piece, even scratched and worn, has fetched over $45,000 at auction. And that's in bad condition. In mint state, with sharp details and clean surfaces, the price can soar into six figures, 125,000 or more for the right error coin. But here's the real shocker. A unique example with an off-metal strike where the nickel was accidentally struck on a planchet meant for a different coin sold for nearly $400,000. Imagine pulling that out of your pocket change. Now let's talk about how to spot one. First, check the mint mark. A weak D that looks ghost-like or misplaced can be a major clue. Next, look at Jefferson's profile, especially the I and the word liberty. If you see doubling or a strange shadow effect, that could be a double die. And finally, always pay attention to the coin's edges and overall strike. Any dramatic off-centering or partial missing design could mean you're holding something very special. It's almost hard to believe, isn't it? A coin minted just 25 years ago, that millions of Americans used every single day, could today be worth more than a brand new luxury car, even if it's scratched, dented, or worn down. That's the magic of error coins, and it's why the 2000 Jefferson nickel deserves a place on this list of ultra-rare treasures. Moving on, let's talk about a year that almost every collector and even non-collectors have seen. The 1964 Jefferson nickel. Now, at first glance, especially in bad condition, this coin looks like it belongs in a jar of loose change or maybe rolling around in the glove compartment of an old car. But here's the shocker. Some 1964 nickels, even beat up, scratched, or heavily worn, can bring staggering amounts at auction. This is one of those coins that can make collectors stop in their tracks because of its history, its production quirks, and the sheer number of oddities that turned a common coin into a potential treasure. So why 1964? Well, this was a fascinating time in U.S. coinage history. The mint was struggling with the national coin shortage. People were hoarding silver coins. And even though nickels didn't contain silver, they were still vanishing from circulation. To keep up, The mint produced more nickels in 1964 than any other year in the entire Jefferson Nickels series. We're talking more than 1 billion nickels struck that year between Philadelphia and Denver. Because of this massive mintage, collectors for years thought 1964 nickels would never be valuable. But as with all things in coin collecting, the devil is in the details. Here's where it gets exciting. Hidden among those billions of coins are some of the most dramatic errors and varieties ever seen on a Jefferson nickel. Doubled dies, repunched mint marks, and full-step designations are what make these coins explode in value. The most famous are the full steps nickels. On the reverse of the coin, at the base of Monticello, you'll see a series of steps. If all the lines are sharp, clear, and unbroken, something that almost never happened in 1964 because the dies were out quickly, then you have what's called a full steps nickel. Even in bad condition, if those steps are visible, you could be looking at thousands of dollars. Collectors have paid more than $10,000 for a 1964 nickel with strong details, even with scratches and circulation marks. And when you get into uncirculated grades with full steps, the prices can skyrocket. One rare variety sold for nearly $150,000 at auction. And then there are the errors, off-center strikes, double strikes, and even a few rare pieces struck on the wrong planchet. 11964D Jefferson nickel struck on a silver dime planchet sold for an astonishing $450,000. That's right, almost $500,000 for what looks, at first glance, like a beat-up old nickel from the 60s. Now, let's talk about how you can identify one of these treasures. First, always flip the coin over and check the steps of Monticello. Even if the coin is worn, you might see traces of those lines. Second, look closely at the mint mark. The D mint mark on Denver coins was sometimes repunched, meaning you might see a faint shadow of a second D that can be worth thousands on its own. And third, keep an eye out for odd weight or size. If your nickel feels thin, light, or has strange edges, it might be a wrong planchet error. Those are the ones that can make you rich. The beauty of the 1964 Jefferson nickel is that it hides in plain sight. Millions of Americans still have them, sitting in drawers, coffee cans, or old banks. To the untrained eye, it's just a worthless piece of metal. But to a collector, even a coin in bad condition could hold the key to a life-changing discovery. And the fact that these nickels, minted in such enormous numbers, can still carry values soaring into six figures is what makes them one of the most jaw-dropping surprises in American coinage. So the next time you come across a 1964 nickel, don't dismiss it because it looks scratched or dirty. Take a closer look, because hidden in that dull little coin might be the kind of rarity that sends shockwaves through the collecting world and leaves you staring at a small fortune. Next up, we come to a coin that almost everyone has seen at one point or another, the 1999p Jefferson nickel. Now, at first glance, especially in no fine condition, this coin looks almost worthless. It's scratched, worn down, maybe even discolored, and most people would never think twice about spending it. But here's the twist. Under the right circumstances, the seemingly ordinary nickel could be worth more than a brand new luxury car or even a small house. Yes, even in terrible condition, certain 1999p nickels have stunned the coin collecting world with their shocking values. So, what makes the 1999p special? First, let's remember where this coin was born: the Philadelphia Mint. The late 1990s were a busy time for the mint, and 1999 in particular marked the final year before the U.S. launched its famous state quarters program in 2000. While most of the attention was on quarters, nickels quietly kept being produced, and in the process, some dramatic errors slipped through the cracks. That's where the story of the 1999p nickel becomes electrifying. Among the billions of nickels struck, a small handful came out with major mistakes. Some were double struck, some were broad struck with stretched and distorted rims, and others landed on the wrong planchets altogether. Collectors have discovered 1999p nickels struck on dime blanks, quarter blanks, and even foreign coin planchets. These wild mint errors can turn a 5-cent coin into a jackpot. One spectacular wrong planchet example sold for over $85,000, despite heavy wear. That's a coin that someone might have thought was junk until a collector saw the error. And the surprises don't stop there. The 1999p also produced some very desirable double dies. The word Liberty, Jefferson's Eye, and even parts of Monticello on the reverse can show dramatic doubling. Even in no fine condition, if that doubling is bold, the coin could be worth $10,000 to $25,000. And in uncirculated grades with strong doubling, prices soar into the six-figure range. One pristine double die has been valued at nearly for a nickel most people would overlook and change. Let's also talk about full steps. By the late 1990s, finding a Jefferson nickel with complete, sharp steps on Monticello was still a challenge. For 1999p nickels, full steps examples are incredibly rare. When they do appear, they can fetch thousands, even tens of thousands depending on condition. Imagine the thrill of spotting those crisp lines on a coin you thought was worthless. So, how do you identify one of these valuable 1999p nickels? Start by checking for doubling. Use a magnifying glass and look closely at Jefferson's profile, especially the eye and the word Liberty. Next, flip the coin and check Monticello steps. Even in poor condition, you may see traces of strong step details. And finally, always check the weight and size. If the coin feels wrong, it could be struck on a foreign or incorrect planchet, and that's when values explode into shocking territory. What makes the 1999p Jefferson nickel so exciting is the contrast between its appearance and its potential. To most people, it's just a worn-out piece of pocket change, but to the trained eye, it could be a six-figure treasure hiding in plain sight. And the idea that a nickel from just a few decades ago could hold this kind of value even when scratched, dented, or discolored is exactly the kind of jaw-dropping surprise that keeps collectors searching every single day. So don't be fooled by condition. The 1999p Jefferson nickel, even in no fine condition, could very well be one of the most shocking and valuable discoveries sitting right under your nose. Now, let's take a closer look at a Jefferson nickel from a very unusual year, 1965. At first, you might think there's nothing special about it. In bad condition, the coin looks dull, worn, and worth no more than its 5-cent face value. But here's where the shock comes in. 1965 was a turning point in American coinage history. And because of that, even beat-up nickels from this year can hold secrets that are worth thousands, and in rare cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars. To understand why, we need to step back into the 1960s. The United States was facing a serious coin shortage. People were hoarding silver coins because the value of silver was rising, and this caused a massive problem for circulation. In response, the mint made two big decisions. First, they removed silver from dimes and quarters, starting in 1965. Second, they froze the use of mint marks between 1965 and 1967 in an effort to discourage hoarding. That meant every coin struck in those years, including the Jefferson nickel, was made without a mint mark. So when you look at a 1965 nickel, you'll notice something odd. There's no D for Denver or P for Philadelphia. That detail alone makes this year stand out. But what really drives collectors wild are the mistakes that happened during this chaotic time. The mint was rushing to meet demand, and in the process, errors slipped through. Off-center strikes, double strikes, broad strikes, and even wrong planchet errors are known for 1965 nickels. In fact, one 1965 Jefferson nickel, struck on a silver dime planchet, shocked the collecting world when it sold for nearly $300,000. Imagine finding that in a handful of change. Even without dramatic errors, certain varieties of the 1965 nickel can bring serious money. Full steps nickels with sharp, clear lines on Monticello are extremely rare from this year. In worn condition, they can still bring in $5,000 to $10,000, and in high-end circulated grades, they soar past $50,000. That's the power of detail. Tiny lines on the back of a coin can be the difference between pocket change and a life-changing discovery. Now, What about those coins in bad condition? This is where things get really interesting. Collectors don't just chase pristine examples, they also love dramatic errors, no matter how beat up the coin may be. A 1965 nickel with a bold off-center strike, even scratched and worn, could easily bring $25,000 or more at auction. And if you happen to stumble upon one of the rare wrong planchet strikes, condition almost doesn't matter. The rarity alone could push values into the six-figure range. So, how can you identify a valuable 1965 nickel? First, remember there will be no mint mark. That's normal. Instead, focus on the details. Flip the coin over and check Monticello's steps. Even faint traces of full steps are valuable. Look for unusual shapes or doubled letters, especially on Liberty or In God We Trust. And always check the edges if they look too thin or too thick, or if the coin feels lighter or heavier than it should. That could point to a wrong planchet error. The beauty of the 1965 Jefferson nickel is that it's hiding in plain sight. Millions were made, and countless people still have them tucked away in jars or old coffee cans. To the untrained eye, a 1965 nickel in bad condition looks worthless, but to collectors, it's a reminder of a turbulent time in U.S. history and a coin that could hold shocking, jaw-dropping value. So the next time you come across one of these dull, worn nickels from 1965, don't pass it over, because under that worn surface might be the kind of discovery that leaves you speechless, staring at a coin that could sell for tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, let's talk about the 1961p Jefferson nickel. At first glance, especially in bad condition, this coin seems like the definition of pocket change. Worn, scratched, maybe even tarnished. It looks like it's worth nothing more than 5 cents. But that's where the surprise comes in. The 1961p nickel has a hidden reputation among collectors, and even in bad condition, it can carry shocking value if you know what to look for. The year 1961 was a time of growth and change in America. John F. Kennedy was president, the space race was heating up, and the U.S. Mint was working overtime to produce coins for a booming economy. At the Philadelphia Mint that year, more than 76 million Jefferson nickels were struck. That may sound like a lot, and it is. But here's the twist. The quality of those coins wasn't always great. Weak strikes, worn dies, and rush production meant that sharp, detailed coins were surprisingly hard to come by. And that's where the opportunity for collectors lies. One of the biggest keys for 1961 nickels is something we've talked about before: the full steps on Monticello. Most nickels from this year were so poorly struck that the steps on the building's base are either weak or missing altogether. If you find a 1961p nickel, even in rough shape, that shows strong, complete steps, you could be looking at a valuable piece. In circulated condition, a full steps coin can bring $3,000 to $5,000. In uncirculated grades, the price rockets past $20,000, and one exceptional example, it reached over $40,000 at auction. But that's not all. The 1961p is also known for some wild mint errors. Off-center strikes, double strikes, and even nickels struck on the wrong planchets have been confirmed. One extraordinary piece, struck on a silver dime blank, sold for over $150,000, and it wasn't even in perfect condition. Another dramatic off-center strike with clear details of Jefferson's face pulled in $25,000, despite heavy wear. That's the kind of coin that leaves collectors shaking their heads in disbelief. Let's not forget about double dies. The 1961p has several varieties where the doubling is visible on Liberty, the motto, "In God We Trust," or even Jefferson's eye. These are rare, and collectors chase them relentlessly. Even a worn-out double die example can still sell for $10,000 or more, and in pristine grades, the value climbs into the six-figure range. So, how can you tell if your beat-up 1961p nickel might actually be worth a fortune? First, flip it over and study the steps of Monticello. Even faint lines can make a huge difference. Second, examine the lettering on both sides for any signs of doubling or shadow-like impressions. And third, check the coin's shape and weight. If it looks oddly thin, thick, or slightly off, you might have a rare wrong planchet strike on your hands. What makes the 1961P so exciting is how ordinary it looks. To most people, it's just a scratched, dull nickel from the early 60s. But to those who know the history, it's a coin from an era of rushed production, sloppy quality control, and incredible error potential. And those are the exact ingredients that create jaw-dropping rarities. So, the next time you find a 1961P Jefferson nickel, even one in bad condition, don't dismiss it. Because that little coin could carry a story of history, rarity, and value beyond anything you imagine. And yes, even a beat-up coin from 1961 could be hiding the kind of secret that turns 5 cents into tens of thousands or even a six-figure fortune. Now, let's turn our attention to the 1971D Jefferson nickel. At first glance, especially in bad condition, this coin looks like the kind of loose change that gets lost between couch cushions or tossed into a parking meter without a second thought. But here's the incredible truth: some 1971D nickels, even in rough shape, have been known to fetch jaw-dropping sums, thanks to their errors, their varieties, and their place in U.S. mint history. The Denver Mint struck over 316 million nickels in 1971. That sheer number makes it sound like they should be common and worthless, and most of them are. But as any seasoned collector will tell you, the value doesn't come from how many were made, it comes from the few that came out different. And in 1971, plenty of unusual nickels slipped through the cracks. First, let's talk about the most famous and desirable type: full steps nickels. By 1971, the mint's dies were already struggling with wear and tear, and crisp strikes were hard to come by. Finding a 1971D with sharp, complete steps on Monticello is like finding a needle in a haystack. Even in circulated condition, a full steps 1971D can bring $5,000 to $10,000. In uncirculated grades, the numbers jump into the tens of thousands. One record-setting example sold for nearly $40,000, proving that even from a high mintage year, treasures exist. But here's where things get even more exciting: the dramatic mint errors of 1971D nickels. Collectors have documented wild off-center strikes, double strikes, and broad strikes where the design looks stretched and warped. Even badly worn error examples can easily fetch $15,000 to $25,000. And then there are the wrong planchet strikes. A 1971D Jefferson nickel struck on a copper cent planchet stunned collectors when it sold for over $120,000. Another, struck on a silver planchet leftover from earlier years, brought in close to $200,000. Just imagine holding onto a beat-up nickel and realizing it's worth more than a brand new car or even a house. There are also a handful of double die varieties for the 1971D that keep collectors searching. Doubling on Jefferson's eye, the lettering of Liberty, or the word trust, has been seen, and even in circulated grades, these coins can reach into the thousands. In pristine condition, prices climb sharply, with values of $50,000 or more possible. For dramatic examples. So, how can you identify if your 1971D nickel in bad condition is a sleeper treasure? First, flip it over and check the steps of Monticello. Even worn steps can reveal sharpness that other coins don't have. Second, look closely at the lettering for doubling or shadow-like impressions. And third, always check the coin's weight. If it feels light, heavy, or off in any way, you may have one of those rare wrong planchet strikes that could change your life. The magic of the 1971D Jefferson nickel is how ordinary it looks. To the untrained eye, it's just a dull coin from the 70s, scratched, worn, maybe even corroded. But to a collector, it represents an era of rushed production, mint mistakes, and hidden rarities. And those factors combined make it one of the most surprising nickels of the entire series. So, don't underestimate a beat-up 1971D nickel. It might look worthless, but hidden in that little coin could be the kind of error or variety that turns a 5-cent piece into tens of thousands or, in some rare cases, a six-figure jackpot. And finally, it ends this incredible journey with the 1985p Jefferson nickel. Now, this is a coin almost everyone has seen. It's modern, it's common, and in bad condition, it looks like the kind of nickel you'd toss into a coin jar without a second glance. But what if I told you that even a 1985 nickel yes, from the mid-80s could be worth a fortune? The truth is, this ordinary-looking coin hides some extraordinary secrets. In 1985, the Philadelphia Mint struck more than 582 million nickels. With a number like that, it's easy to assume they're all worthless. But here's the fascinating twist. Hidden among those hundreds of millions are some of the rarest varieties and most jaw-dropping errors ever seen in the series. And that's what makes this coin one of the most shocking of all. Let's start with the strike quality. By the mid-1980s, the Mint was still struggling to produce sharp, detailed Jefferson nickels. Dies were down quickly, and most coins came out with weak details. That means full steps nickels coins where Monticello's steps are sharp and complete are incredibly rare. Even in circulated grades, a 1985p with full steps can sell for $3,000 to $5,000. In mint state, those numbers skyrocket into the tens of thousands. The record price for a pristine full steps 1985p, nearly $35,000 at auction. Not bad for a coin most people think is worth a nickel, but the real shockers come from mint errors. Some 1985p nickels were struck off center, creating dramatic, eye-catching designs. Even in bad condition, these can pull in $10,000 to $15,000. And then there are the wrong planchet errors, the ones every collector dreams of. A 1985p struck on a copper cent blank sold for over $75,000. Another, struck on a foreign planchet, went for more than $150,000. And the ultimate prize, a rare 1985p nickel struck on a silver dime planchet that sold for an astonishing $400,000. That's right, nearly $500,000 for a coin from the 80s that most people would spend without hesitation. And if that's not enough, there are also double dies from this year. Collectors have identified doubling on In God We Trust, Liberty, and even Jefferson's profile. These varieties are rare, but they exist. Even in poor condition, a dramatic doubled die from 1985 can sell for tens of thousands. So, how do you spot a valuable 1985p nickel? First, flip the coin over and study the steps of Monticello. Even if your coin is worn, you might notice sharper lines than usual. That's your first clue. Next, check for odd shapes, stretched letters, or doubled images. And finally, always, weigh your coin. If the numbers don't match up with what a nickel should weigh, you might be holding one of those legendary wrong planchet errors worth more than you ever dreamed. What makes the 1985p Jefferson nickel so shocking is its age. It's not old. It's not from the 1930s or the silver era. It's from the mid-1980s, a time that feels modern to most of us. And yet, it has produced some of the most valuable rarities in the entire Jefferson nickel series. To the untrained eye, it's a dull, scratched coin from yesterday. But to collectors, it's a modern marvel. A coin that proves you don't need centuries of age to create six-figure treasures. So the next time you see a 1985 nickel in your change, no matter how bad the condition, stop and look closer. Because that little coin could be the hidden jackpot that leaves you speechless, staring at a fortune in the palm of your hand.